Hello everyone, Jules here. Today I'd like to talk about 3 books about esoteric topics, and these topics are about alchemy, Hermeticism and magic. So the first book is The Forbidden Universe. This is by Lynn, Picknett and Clive. So this is a paperback book. It's quite thick and it covers quite a wide range of topics, and it's actually it's a bit of a historical book, as well as a very interesting book about the occult origins of science and the search for the mind of God. That is the subtitle. But it's really to do with the occult origins and the connection of the occult origins, especially Hermeticism and alchemy, connected to the origin of science. It's a really interesting book. It's very well written and it's quite accessible. Don't be put off by the science mention, because some people might think that's a rather dry topic, but the way this book has been written, it's very accessible and it's quite interesting. So the subtitle on the back says The Forbidden Universe uncovers a story that has been suppressed for centuries, that an ancient magical tradition holds the key to the true origins of science. And what the reference to the ancient magical tradition here is actually Hermeticism. And there's also the alchemy connection too, because alchemy was actually practiced before chemistry. So this goes all the way back to Hermeticism and the Corpus Hermeticum documents. And it's just a really interesting read. It's just very, very, very well written. Here's one of the black and white pictures in here. This is Mercury. This is a historical drawing of Mercury here, who is the god associated with Hermeticism. So that's just one of the pictures in here. There's not a lot of pictures in here, but there is reference to Giordano Bruno. And I'll just give you a bit of an idea of what's in this book. It's a really, really interesting introduction. It goes, part 1 is the occult roots of science. Talks about Copernicus, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, which is really important too, because that was a later Renaissance branch out of Hermeticism and Hermetic ideas. Even Isaac Newton here and the Invisible Brotherhood. Also a mention of the true legacy of Egypt. And what I want to mention too about Egypt, I know Egypt is mentioned quite often with the Hermetic connection, and I just want to mention what that is actually about, because I know a lot of people think, oh well, what is Egypt? What is the connection with Hermeticism? That is to do with the Egyptian city, the far northern Egyptian city on the far northern African continent of Alexandria, where the original Alexandrian library was situated, which was a great melting pot of ideas. Pythagoras, Plato, the Greek philosophers spent a lot of time in Alexandria. So there was an exchange of Egyptian and Greek ideas that goes way back to ancient times. That is why there is a connection between the Egyptian god Thoth and the Greek Hermes. which later became the Roman Mercury or Mercurius. That is why the Egyptian legacy is often mentioned in connection with Hermeticism. That is why I wanted to just mention that, because I think a lot of people don't understand. They're sort of puzzled. Well, what's Egypt got to do with this, with Hermeticism in particular? I quite like this book. I think it is so accessible to read. I think this would be a great first book for people to learn about the background history of Hermeticism, Alchemy, Rosicrucianism, and the fact that it is connected to early science, particularly in the Western world and in Europe. So, The Forbidden Universe by Lynn, Picknett and Clive Prince. They have written quite a few books together on different topics. I think this is their best book. I think this is a great book. It's quite easily obtainable. You'd be able to get this quite easily. So if you're interested in this one, I think it's a great book. The Forbidden Universe. Now the next book, this is a wonderful book written by a great author, Stairway to Heaven by Peter Levenda, who is one of my favourite esoteric writers. Peter Levenda is a great author. Stairway to Heaven is about the theory of ascent, which is quite an important theory in esotericism, but it's overlooked quite a lot. I don't know why, because it's really quite fundamental, but the theory of ascent seems to be overlooked a bit. The subtitle is Alchemists, Jewish Kabbalists and the Art of Spiritual Transformation. This is a great book. It goes all the way through ancient times, but it covers the really important origins. Of course, it starts with Egypt, then Babylon. We're talking about ancient myth and ritual. So it starts with Egypt and Babylon, which were kind of simultaneous. They were simultaneously happening kind of civilizations. They were around about all the same time frame. Then we get into the Jewish mysticism and theory of ascent, which is to do with the Merkaba chariot, which all comes from the vision of Ezekiel from the Old Testament, from the Bible. So this talks about the vision of Ezekiel as a template for mystical ascent. And then it also talks about celestial ascent, which is to do with the stars in Middle Eastern mysticism. So this is such an interesting and well-written book. It even involves, it's got some shamanism in here, because that's about ascent. So the flight of the shamans. We have even got the inclusion of Afro-Caribbean and African religions in here, the celestial ascent of that part of the world. And then it goes into Christian Kabbalah and the esoteric orders, the origins of the Western tradition, the chemical wedding of the alchemical process as celestial ascent, and then the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light. So I am a big fan of this book. It is a wonderful book. Stairway to Heaven by Peter Levenda. I just love the way that this book has been written. It's very interesting. It is fairly accessible. It's not as accessible as the first book. The first book, The Forbidden Universe, I think someone who knows very little about esoteric topics could just pick that up and read it. But for people who know a bit more background about esoteric topics, and particularly want to know about the theories and concept of ascent and what that's about, this is a great book. It's a unique book. I haven't seen any other esoteric books, books on esoteric topics about the theory of ascent. This is the only one I've seen, and fortunately it is so well written. It is the best book on the topic. This is quite easy to get. It's only written a few years ago, so this is quite obtainable. Stairway to Heaven by Peter Levenda. And the third book is a little bit different, but it's covering an approach to magic that is not mentioned and not looked at very often, and I think this is great. I really like this. I've got the hardcover of this book, but I'm fairly sure it is available in paperback, and if you can't still get this in print, it's still in print, I'm sure, but if not, you can get this on Amazon. This is The Philosopher's Secret Fire by Patrick Harpur, and the subtitle is A History of the Imagination. Now, with this title, you would think, okay, The Philosopher's Fire, it's about alchemy. It's about other things as well. But where you have the subtitle about a history of the imagination, this is about the concept of the imaginative insight. So the insight of imagination and how that has tied in through history in regard to magic and alchemy and all of the esoteric concepts and ideas that developed. I think this is great. It's a really good book. It's a very interesting book, but I love the way that the whole concept of imagination has been written about, and this is the only book that I have seen that includes the imaginative insight. And when you think about that, it does make sense, because all of the different practitioners of magic, alchemy, Hermeticism, they did need these insights of imagination. They did need that. I think it would have been the whole motive. I mean, I know that magic has been used for the motive of power, but I do think imagination is a big part of that. If these magicians and alchemists through history, the Hermeticists, if they did not think that anything was possible within their imagination and being able to obtain these insights that actually kept them going and kept that drive and motivation alive. So I'll give you an idea of what's in this book as well. So there's a whole range of different chapters and topics in here, but I'll just give you an idea of some of them. One of the chapters is the composition of the Magi. So this is about Hermes, Ficino. The Art of Kabbalah is in here. Then you've got Conjuring Angels in the next chapter with John Dee and Bruno science and magic connection. Then you've got a bit of mythology in here as well, with Venus and Adonis, even Shakespeare, the ideas or concepts of Shakespeare. You've got a whole chapter on Mercury, which is called Mercurius, and the mirror of alchemy is one of the sections in here. The concept of red mercury, the transmuting power, the great work. There's another section here called the Raven's Head. Then you've got the philosopher's retorts in here, Mercury and sulfur. A little bit of here again about Newton's golden trees, and the cosmos and the universe is another chapter. Parallel worlds, even goes into dark matter. Then you've also got some other Nordic and Greek mythology as well. Hercules in the underworld, Balder's dream. It's just a wonderful book. It's very, very interesting. There's even an earlier chapter here about Peer Gynt and the trolls, and how this all ties in with this imagination. You've got Apollo, the concept or the idea of feminine sun and masculine moon. Now, I've actually talked about that one before in another video. There's a chapter on matter and spirits. It's a really great book. It sort of just goes on and on after that. It just covers so many topics and a lot of ground. It may not be for everyone. I think it's really for people who have already got a fairly good understanding of esoteric topics, and they would like the idea of the intertwining of the imagination and how this all ties in with alchemy and magic and Hermeticism. How it's all underpinned and also branches out from there. So I think it's for people who want something different, a different approach, looking at esoteric topics from a different angle. It's really well written. It's relatively approachable. I think for some people, I think it's for people who want quite a wide overview. If you would like quite a wide overview and something that is a bit different, this is a really good book for that. So this is The Philosopher's Secret Fire, A History of the Imagination by Patrick Harpur. And as I was saying, this is available, I'm sure, on in paperback. It should still be in print, otherwise you'll be able to get this on Amazon. So these are 3 great books, very interesting, all on the topics of alchemy, Hermeticism and magic. They all tie in. These are intertwining sorts of books, but they are great books on those topics for people who are interested. And I will put the details below the video. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.